Walk outside on a bright afternoon. Stand in the sun for 10 seconds. Feel the warmth on your face, on your forearms, on the back of your neck. Something is happening inside your skull right now that you cannot feel and cannot see. It started the moment sunlight hit your eyes, not your skin, your eyes. And the thing it triggered has nothing to do with vision. Within 90 seconds of that sunlight entering your retina, a chemical chain reaction began in a region of your brain you have never consciously controlled. That reaction will alter your confidence, your risk tolerance, and your willingness to hand over money for the next several hours. And you will not notice any of it. You will simply feel good. You will feel like buying something, and you will believe it was your idea. The average person spends 56% more on impulse purchases on sunny days compared to overcast days. Same stores, same products, same prices, same person. The only variable that changed was the sky. And the sky changed your brain before you ever reached for your wallet. What most people assume is simple. Sun comes out, mood goes up, happy people spend more. That is the folk explanation, and it is almost entirely wrong. What is actually happening is not a mood shift. It is a molecular event. A specific photon wavelength is triggering a specific enzyme in a specific brain region to produce a specific neurotransmitter at a measurably increased rate. And that neurotransmitter does not make you happy. It makes you confident. The difference between happiness and confidence is the difference between sitting in a park and walking into a store and buying something you did not plan to buy. Here is the physics. Sunlight is electromagnetic radiation. It travels at 300 million meters per second from a star 93 million miles away, and it arrives at the surface of the Earth as a spectrum of wavelengths. The portion visible to the human eye falls between approximately 400 and 700 nanometers. But within that band, a narrower range matters for what happens next. Blue light, wavelengths between 460 and 480 nanometers. Not the full visible spectrum, a specific slice of it. When blue wavelength photons pass through your cornea and lens, they reach the retina at the back of your eye. Most of the cells in the retina are rods and cones. They handle vision, but scattered among them is a third type of photoreceptor cell discovered remarkably recently. In 2002, Dr. Seema Hattar and Dr. David Burson at Brown University identified intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, IPRGCs for short. These cells contain a photopigment called melanopsin, and melanopsin responds most strongly to blue light at approximately 480 nanometers. These cells do not contribute to image formation. You do not see through them. They do not help you read or recognize faces or judge distance. They are not part of your visual system in any functional sense. They are a light measuring instrument embedded in the back of your eye, wired directly to a structure deep in your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. The suprachiasmatic nucleus is a cluster of roughly 20,000 neurons sitting above the optic chiasm, the point where your optic nerves cross. It is your master clock. It coordinates circadian rhythms across every organ system in your body. And when melanopsin detects blue light, the suprachiasmatic nucleus sends a signal downward through the paraventricular nucleus to the raphe nuclei in the brainstem. The raphe nuclei are the primary production site for serotonin, and here is a number that makes the mechanism concrete. On a clear day at noon, the sunlight reaching your eyes delivers approximately 100,000 lux. Your office lighting delivers 300 to 500 lux. The threshold for significant serotonin modulation through the melanopsin pathway is roughly 2,500 lux. This means your indoor environment provides roughly 1% of the light intensity required to trigger the full neurochemical cascade. The moment you walk outside on a sunny day, the input to your melanopsin cells increases by 200-fold. Your brain does not experience this as a gradual shift, it experiences it as a switch being thrown. In 2002, Dr. Gavin Lambert at the Baker Heart Research Institute in Melbourne measured serotonin turnover in human subjects using jugular vein sampling, direct measurement, not a proxy, not a questionnaire, not an inference from behavior. He measured the actual serotonin metabolite concentration in blood leaving the brain. His finding was unambiguous. Serotonin production rate correlated directly with the amount of bright sunlight on the day of measurement. Not the season, not the temperature, the sunlight. On the brightest days, serotonin turnover was roughly 8 times higher than on the darkest days. 8 times. From the same brain, the same person. The only variable was the light entering through the eyes. This is not metaphor. This is physics. A photon of a specific wavelength striking a specific photopigment, triggering a neural cascade that terminates in the synthesis of a specific molecule. Electromagnetic radiation converted to neurochemistry through a pathway that operates entirely below conscious awareness. You do not decide to produce serotonin. Your retina decides for you based on the spectral content of the light entering your eye. Now, here is what that means for your body. Serotonin is a monoamine neurotransmitter synthesized from the amino acid tryptophan by the enzyme tryptophan hydroxylase. In the central nervous system, it modulates mood, cognition, reward processing, and critically, it modulates impulse control. The prefrontal cortex, the region of your brain responsible for evaluating consequences, weighing costs, and inhibiting impulsive behavior, is densely populated with serotonin receptors. When serotonin levels rise, the prefrontal cortex does not become more active. It becomes less inhibitory. The braking system in your brain softens, not dramatically, not dangerously, just enough that decisions that would normally trigger a pause, a moment of hesitation, a voice in your head saying, "Do I really need this?" pass through with less friction. There is a second mechanism operating at the same time. Sunlight suppresses melatonin production. Melatonin is the hormone your pineal gland releases in darkness to promote sleep. In bright sunlight, melatonin drops to near zero in your bloodstream. The suppression of melatonin produces a measurable increase in alertness, energy, and locomotor activity. You move more. You walk faster. You cover more ground. You enter more stores. The simple physics of photon-induced melatonin suppression increases your physical exposure to purchasing opportunities. And there is a third layer. In 2011, Dr. Mirjam Tuck at the University of Twente published research showing that elevated serotonin increases what psychologists call approach motivation, the tendency to move toward rewarding stimuli rather than away from risk. In low serotonin states, the brain defaults to avoidance, caution, conservation. In elevated serotonin states, the brain shifts toward approach, exploration, acquisition, spending. A study published in 2010 by Kyle Murray and colleagues at the University of Alberta measured actual consumer spending across 37 retail categories over 6 years, controlling for day of week, holidays, and seasonal trends. Their finding was specific. On sunny days, consumer spending increased by 56% on impulse purchases. Not planned purchases, not groceries or rent or bills. Impulse purchases, the category of spending most sensitive to the neurochemical state of the buyer at the moment of the decision. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that says wait and think and do I really need this, is operating with reduced inhibitory output because serotonin has softened its braking function. Your melatonin is suppressed, so you are alert and physically active and covering more retail ground. Your approach motivation is elevated, so you are drawn toward things rather than cautious about them. 3 mechanisms, all triggered by the same photon wavelength, all operating below conscious awareness, all converging on the same behavioral outcome. You spend more. This is not willpower. This is neuroscience. Now let me tell you about a man who understood light better than almost anyone alive and still could not see what it was doing to human behavior. In the late 1970s, Dr. Alfred Lewy was a young psychiatrist at the National Institute of Mental Health. The prevailing belief at the time was that ordinary indoor lighting was bright enough to suppress melatonin in humans, just as it did in laboratory animals. Lewy was not convinced. He designed an experiment using light intensities that matched outdoor conditions, roughly 2500 lux and above, and measured melatonin suppression in human subjects at night. The results contradicted everything his field assumed. Ordinary indoor light, typically 100 to 500 lux, did almost nothing to melatonin. But outdoor intensity light, above 2500 lux, suppressed it powerfully. The human melatonin system was calibrated to sunlight, not to light bulbs. Nobody had tested it at the right intensity because nobody believed it mattered. Lewy published his findings in 1980 inches the journal Science. The paper fundamentally changed the field. It led directly to the development of light therapy for seasonal affective disorder. It established that the human brain treats indoor light and sunlight as categorically different signals. It proved that the neurochemical environment inside your skull is dictated in part by whether you are indoors or outdoors, under artificial light or under the sun. And here is the irony. Lewy spent his career studying what light does to melatonin and mood. He understood the serotonin connection. He understood the circadian disruption. But the financial implications, the fact that the same photon-induced neurochemical shift he had documented was driving billions of dollars in consumer spending every year, were never part of his research. The man who proved that sunlight rewires your brain chemistry never asked what that rewiring does to your wallet. The answer was outside his field. It was floating in the economics literature, waiting for someone to connect the two. Now here's where this gets uncomfortable, because the people who did connect the two were not scientists, they were retailers. Mall designers have known about daylight effects on spending for decades. The International Council of Shopping Centers published guidelines in the early 2000s recommending increased natural light in retail environments. Not for energy efficiency, not for ambiance, for sales conversion, skylights in shopping malls are not architectural choices, they are revenue tools. The sunlight pouring through the glass ceiling of a mall atrium is performing the same neurochemical operation on every shopper walking beneath it. Serotonin up, melatonin down. Approach motivation elevated. Prefrontal inhibition reduced. The architecture is designed to let the sun do what the sun does to a human brain and then surround that brain with things to buy. Las Vegas casinos operate on the opposite principle. No windows, no daylight, no sky. The absence of sunlight keeps melatonin from suppressing and keeps the body confused about time, which serves a different business model. But the principle is identical. Control the light and you control the neurochemistry. Control the neurochemistry and you influence the spending. Grocery stores discovered that produce sections positioned near windows with natural light exposure generated 18% higher sales than identical produce sections under fluorescent lighting. The food did not change. The light changed, and the light changed the brain looking at the food. There is something even more precise happening in digital retail. E-commerce companies have tested weather-targeted advertising. When the weather API reports sunny conditions at a user's location, certain platforms increase the frequency of impulse category advertisements, fashion, accessories, gadgets, food delivery. Not because the products are seasonal, because the user's serotonin is elevated and their impulse resistance is reduced. The targeting is not demographic, it is neurochemical. The algorithm does not know your serotonin level, it knows your weather. And your weather predicts your serotonin with enough accuracy to shift conversion rates by double digits. A 2015 study by Lisa Kavanaugh at the University of Southern California found that even images of sunshine, photographs of bright outdoor scenes shown to participants before purchasing decisions, increased willingness to pay for unrelated products by 14%. The brain does not require actual sunlight. The visual system responds to the representation of sunlight with a partial activation of the same melanopsin-mediated pathway. 14% increase in willingness to pay from looking at a photograph of a sunny day. Advertising agencies have understood this intuitively for decades. Now the neuroscience explains why every car commercial, every perfume advertisement, every luxury product placement is bathed in golden sunlight. The light in the advertisement is not showing you the product. It is dosing your serotonin. The estimated annual cost of sunlight-driven impulse spending for the average American consumer is between $1,700 and $2,400. That is not a guess. That is derived from the Murray study data extrapolated across average sunny day frequency by region and average impulse purchase amounts from the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey. The number varies by geography. A person living in Phoenix sees roughly 300 sunny days per year. A person living in Seattle sees roughly 150. The Phoenix resident is neurochemically primed for impulse spending almost twice as often. Now, the evidence calibration. The serotonin pathway from blue light through melanopsin to the raphe nuclei is established neuroscience, measured, replicated, understood at the molecular level. The melatonin suppression by bright light above 2500 lux is documented by Lewy and confirmed by dozens of subsequent studies. The Murray spending data is a 6-year controlled study across 37 retail categories. The mall design connection is documented in industry literature. The exact dollar figure of $1,700 to $2,400 is an extrapolation. Your personal number depends on your shopping habits, your geography, and how often you are exposed to bright sunlight before or during purchasing decisions. The physics supports every link in the chain. The exact cost per individual is an estimate, not a measurement. Now think about what you felt at the start. You stood in the sun, warmth on your face, a good feeling, a simple, uncomplicated moment. But beneath that warmth, a 480 nanometer photon was passing through your cornea, striking melanopsin in a retinal ganglion cell that does not even participate in vision, sending a signal through the suprachiasmatic nucleus to the raphe nuclei, increasing the synthesis of serotonin from tryptophan, softening the inhibitory output of your prefrontal cortex, suppressing melatonin through the pineal gland, elevating your locomotor activity and your approach motivation, and preparing your brain to say yes to things it would have said no to under an overcast sky. The sun did not change the price of anything. It changed the brain evaluating the price. And every mall designer and retail architect and grocery store layout engineer in the developed world knows it. Tomorrow, before you walk into a store on a bright afternoon, pause for 10 seconds. Not because the sun is dangerous, not because shopping is wrong, but because those 10 seconds activate your prefrontal cortex. They give your inhibitory circuits a chance to catch up with your serotonin. 10 seconds of conscious pause on a sunny day is the neurological equivalent of putting your hands back on the steering wheel that the sun quietly took from you.